Psychology says that people often reveal more through their behavior than through their words, but not always in the way you might think. For decades, people have searched for a simple trick to tell when someone is hiding something. They've been told to watch for eye contact, to look for nervous movements, to pay attention to crossed arms or a shaky voice. Movies make it seem easy. One suspicious glance, one awkward pause, one drop of sweat, and suddenly the detective knows the truth. But real human psychology is far more complicated than that. In fact, one of the biggest misconceptions about deception is the belief that there is a single behavior that proves someone is lying. There isn't. Psychologists have spent decades studying deception, body language, and human behavior. And the conclusion is surprisingly clear. No single facial expression, no single gesture, no single tone of voice can reliably tell you whether someone is hiding something. Why? Because people are different. Some people become nervous when they're completely honest. Others remain calm even when they're lying. Some naturally avoid eye contact because they're shy. Others maintain intense eye contact because they believe that's what honest people are supposed to do. Human behavior is far too complex to fit into one simple rule. So if there isn't one universal sign, what do psychologists actually look for? The answer is patterns, not isolated behaviors. Patterns? Imagine meeting someone for the first time. You wouldn't know what's normal for them. You wouldn't know whether they naturally speak quickly, whether they're naturally anxious, whether they always avoid eye contact. Without knowing their normal behavior, it's almost impossible to recognize when something changes. Psychologists call this a baseline. A baseline is the way someone normally behaves when they feel comfortable. How they speak, how they move, how expressive they are, how much eye contact they naturally make. Only after understanding that baseline does it become possible to notice meaningful changes. And that's where the first clue begins. A sudden shift in behavior. Let's say someone is relaxed, confident, and conversational throughout an entire discussion. Then one specific topic comes up. Suddenly they become quieter. Their answers become shorter. They pause more often. They seem unusually uncomfortable. Does that prove they're hiding something? No. But it tells you something important. That topic affected them differently. The change itself is meaningful, not because it proves deception, but because it reveals emotion. That emotion could be fear, stress, embarrassment, anxiety, or yes, it could be an attempt to conceal information. The key is not to jump to conclusions. The key is to stay curious. Another behavior psychologists pay close attention to is inconsistency. Our brains retrieve memories differently than they create stories. When someone is remembering a real experience, they often recall details naturally. When someone is inventing or altering information, they may have to actively construct their answer. That extra mental effort can sometimes lead to inconsistencies. Maybe the timeline changes, maybe certain details disappear, maybe new details suddenly appear that weren't mentioned before. Again, this doesn't automatically mean someone is being dishonest. Memory itself is imperfect. Even truthful people accidentally misremember events. That's why professionals rarely focus on one inconsistency. Instead, they look for repeated contradictions that don't have a reasonable explanation. One contradiction means very little. A consistent pattern of contradictions is much more informative. Another interesting behavior involves the amount of information people give. Most people assume liars tell shorter stories, but psychology shows it isn't always that simple. Sometimes people who are hiding something do the exact opposite. They provide excessive details. They explain things nobody asked about. They continue talking long after the question has been answered. Why? Because they believe more information makes them sound more believable. Ironically, truthful people often answer simple questions with simple answers. They don't feel the need to convince you. They simply tell you what happened. Of course, this isn't a universal rule. Some honest people naturally talk a lot. Which brings us back to the same principle. Always compare behavior to the person's normal baseline. One of the most misunderstood areas of psychology is body language. For years, people have repeated myths like, if they look away, they're lying. If they touch their face, they're lying. If they cross their arms, they're hiding something. These ideas became popular because they're simple. Unfortunately, human behavior isn't. Someone might avoid eye contact because they're anxious. They might cross their arms because they're cold. They might touch their face because it itches. Context matters. Psychologists consistently emphasize that body language should never be interpreted in isolation. Instead, it should be understood alongside the person's words, the situation, and their normal behavior. Perhaps the most reliable lesson psychology teaches isn't how to catch a liar. It's how to avoid making false assumptions. Because our brains naturally jump to conclusions, we notice one unusual behavior and immediately create a story. But stories aren't always true. That's why experienced investigators, psychologists, and interviewers don't rely on instincts alone. They gather information, they compare patterns, they ask follow-up questions, they look for consistency over time. And maybe that's the biggest takeaway of all. People are complicated, behavior is complicated, and deception is complicated. There is no magical formula, no secret body language trick, no single sign that reveals the truth every time. Instead, psychology encourages us to observe carefully, think critically, and resist the temptation to judge too quickly. Because sometimes the person who looks nervous is completely innocent. And sometimes the person who appears perfectly calm is the one hiding the most. The truth is rarely found in one moment. It's found in the pattern that unfolds over time. Perhaps the most surprising lesson psychology teaches isn't how to catch someone hiding the truth. It's how easy it is for us to misjudge people. We often believe we can read others like an open book, a nervous smile, a shaky voice, a moment of silence, and our minds immediately begin creating a story. But psychology reminds us that behavior is rarely that simple. The same behavior can have many different explanations. Someone may hesitate because they're lying or because they're anxious. They may avoid eye contact because they're hiding something or because they're shy. They may become defensive because they're guilty or because they feel falsely accused. This is why psychologists emphasize observing patterns instead of isolated moments. One behavior means very little. Several consistent behaviors, combined with context, paint a much clearer picture. And even then, certainty is rare. Human beings are incredibly complex. Our thoughts, emotions, and experiences shape the way we behave in ways that aren't always visible on the surface. The truth is, there is no secret formula that can tell you with absolute certainty whether someone is hiding something. Anyone who claims otherwise is oversimplifying human psychology. Instead, the real power of psychology lies in helping us become better observers, more patient, more curious, and less likely to jump to conclusions. Because understanding people isn't about looking for a single tell, it's about recognizing patterns, considering context, and remembering that every person has a story you can't immediately see. So the next time you think someone might be hiding something, don't ask yourself, what's the one sign that proves they're lying? Instead, ask, what does the bigger picture tell me? Because psychology says the truth is rarely found in one expression, one gesture, or one moment. It's found in patterns. And those who understand patterns understand people. If you enjoyed learning about the psychology behind human behavior, don't forget to subscribe to Psychology Says Studio for more videos exploring the hidden patterns of the human mind. Because sometimes understanding people begins with understanding psychology.